gathering place for Indigenous peoples, and we recognize their deep connection to these places. We extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live and learn on their territory. So, a little bit about Thought on Tap. What we are a public engagement series that brings together diverse faculty, staff, students, and community members for important conversations around timely topics. Thought on Tap is brought to you by the Core Humanities Program, Laughing Planet, the College of Liberal Arts, and the University of Nevada, Reno. Our theme for this academic year is rethinking. So in the fall, we've talked about rethinking America, rethinking our tech overlords. We're talking about rethinking education today, and we will be thinking about rethinking conservative movements later on in December as well. In the spring, we'll be talking about rethinking artivism, sports, work and money, and also race and comedy. So we hope that you can make it. We usually are the second Thursday of every month, although this one we are a little bit later. So some basic information about our program tonight. So we will run for about an hour until about 6:30. I'll start off by introducing the topic, then I'll introduce our panelists. And then I do have a couple general questions to get us started. After that, we do encourage questions from the audience, and we hope to really get to your questions as soon as possible. So at this point, I do want to introduce the topic. So when we think about rethinking education, so education is fundamental. Through education, we reveal core truths about what we value as a community, as well as what we want to become in the future. In the United States, we have built one of the most expansive and dynamic systems of higher education in the world. However, there are serious questions and concerns about higher education in this country. One of the most significant issues is cost. Over the past 20 years, the average cost of attending college in the US has tripled to more than $35,000 per year per student, with an annual rate of growth of 6.8%. At a 4-year in-state public institution, the average price for the cost of attendance for a student living on campus is $25,000 per year, or about $100,000 for 4 years. Given these figures, many potential students are being priced out of higher education, and they end up being burdened with substantial loans. Another issue related to higher education is who gets to attend university, who gets to partake. As we discussed in a panel last year on building legacies of equity in higher education, there are massive inequities in representation and opportunity in the educational system in this country. Traditionally underserved students, including students of color, as well as students from low-income households, are far less likely to attend a 4-year institution than their peers. At the same time, they are far more likely to be suspended, expelled, or drop out of such institutions. This raises questions about how we can diversify higher education, as well as how we can support students and faculty from traditionally underrepresented communities. These questions, in turn, bring us to the fact that education in the United States has become increasingly political. From debates about teaching critical race theory, to protests about free speech on college campuses, to individual donors exerting undue influence on who receives tenure, education has become a political battlefield in the United States, with individual beliefs about education and expertise being increasingly tied to political identification. As if these issues were not enough, there have been multiple seismic shocks to the educational system in the US over the past 2 decades. First, there was the financial crisis of 2008, which caused numerous universities to institute severe budget cutbacks and even to close their doors. More recently, we have been living through the COVID-19 pandemic. However, I do not just want to focus on some of these issues or problems. One of the unexpected results of the pandemic has been a giant leap forward in online teaching and the use of technology in the classroom. In many ways, over the past 2 years, higher education has been transformed. So this brings us to our conversation today. And I have some general questions I want to start with, and then a couple more specific questions as we move forward. Before doing that, however, I do want to take a minute and go ahead and introduce our panelists who I'm very excited to speak with tonight. The first of these is Austin Brown. Austin is a senior studying political science and psychology in the Honors College. He is currently the ASUN president and has been a member of the association for the past 3 years, serving previously as the vice president and also as the chief of staff. Austin is a native Nevadan, born and raised here in Reno. After graduating in spring 2022, Austin plans to attend law school, pending his LSAT scores that come in around December 1st. Austin, do you just want to say hello really quickly?
Hello, everybody. I just want to say thank you so much to Dr. Rodriguez for having me today. It has been a really cool experience to be here with you all. I remember being in his core humanities class my freshman year, and now getting to be a part of these Thought on Tap series, super exciting. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Austin. And thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. So our next panelist is Deborah Modelmog. Deborah is the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Professor of English at the University of Nevada, Reno. During her 5-year tenure in this position, she has implemented a number of strategic initiatives, encouraged the development of new academic programs, hired significant numbers of new faculty with an emphasis on diversifying the academic faculty and curriculum, and emphasizing student success in faculty research and grant acquisition. Among other projects, she has led the development of an applied liberal arts initiative, helped to create a dual degree program for liberal arts students seeking to become secondary school teachers, worked with the UNR Medical School to establish a pathway for liberal arts students to gain admission to medical school and foster connections between the college and the community. So Deborah, would you say hello, please?
Yes, thank you so much, Breton, or Dr. Rodriguez. I really appreciate it and am excited to be here. I actually worked with Tim Helian several years ago. This is kind of his brainchild, the Thought on Tap series. And so it's nice to see it come full circle where I'm actually a panelist now on this series that he wanted to create to bring together the community and the university. And I think it's been a super successful series. And thanks so much to you and your co-hosts who have put this all together, because it's been really great for our college and great for our university and community. So thank you.
Well, thank you for your support. Thank you for being here. And yeah, I mean, thank you to Tim as well. I mean, we hope to be back in Laughing Planet very soon. Being online was initially a temporary thing, and we're still in this temporary situation, but we hope to be back in person as soon as possible. So our next panelist is Romando Nash. Romando serves as the Associate Vice President for Student Life Services at the University of Nevada, Reno, where he provides leadership for the Student Life Services portfolio, which includes the following functional areas: Dean of Students, Student Conduct, Fraternity and Sorority Life, New Student Initiatives, Career Studio, Residential Life, Housing and Food Services, Joe Crowley Student Union, Student Persistence Research, Associate Students of the University of Nevada, ASUN Nevada Wolf Shop, Center for Student Engagement, Fitness and Recreational Sports, Counseling Services, and the Multicultural Center. So as you can see, he wears a lot of different hats and has a lot of different responsibilities. Prior to his position at UNR, he served as the Associate Vice President for Student Services at San Jose State University, the Associate Dean of Student Affairs, and the Executive Director for Residential Education at the University of Southern California, and held Senior Housing Officer, Student Conduct, and Multicultural Affairs positions at the University of Southern California, Loyola University Chicago, Seattle University, and Santa Clara University. Romano stays active and holds leadership positions in several professional associations and has taught undergraduate and graduate level courses throughout his career. So Romando, please go ahead and say hello.
Thank you, Dr. Reese. Thank you for the invitation. Really looking forward to the conversation and being in conversation and community with the colleagues there, folks I respect a lot, and can't wait to hear their thoughts about where we're going in terms of this future of education.
Excellent, thank you. And thank you so much for being here. All right, and our final panelist is David Shintani. David is the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education at the University of Nevada, Reno. He previously served as the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs in the College of Agriculture, Biotechnology, and Natural Resources at the University of Nevada, Reno, where he is a professor in the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology. So David, please go ahead and say hello.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez, for inviting me to speak. I'm excited to address the questions that you're bringing forward, and especially having this time to spend a discussion with some of my favorite people on campus. So this will be, I'm really excited about this. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And thank you so much for being here. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it. So the first question is quite general, and I figure we can go around and just have everyone say something really, really quickly. So the first question here is just, what do you think is the most pressing issue in higher education today? And I'm thinking about this for students, for faculty, for administration. So when you think about education today, and you think about the issues that we're facing, what's the most pressing? And I think we could just go back in order is my thought. So David, if you wanna start us off perhaps, and we'll go that way.
I think today we're still recovering from the pandemic. There's been a lot of issues that have impacted our ability to operate on campus, and it required us to be fairly nimble in terms of delivery of our instruction, also addressing the needs of our student staff and faculty regarding safety issues related to the pandemic. I think we're also seeing a lot of things that the pandemic, consequences of the pandemic, such as labor shortages for students on campus. We can't afford to pay students to student workers on campus because there's so many more lucrative positions off campus. So just the general operations of our campus have changed so much in as a result of the pandemic. And I think our challenges are trying to develop some sense of normalcy again, and providing our students with a quality educational experience, but also a quality kind of college life experience here. So, and I think my colleagues here have all done really great jobs on supporting it. Ramondo's done quite a bit of really great programs to support student life on campus, and Dr. Modelmog has done quite a bit also, and Austin ASUN has been amazing. So anyway, I'll stop there.
That sounds great, thank you. So Ramondo, do you want to go ahead and go next, and we'll go around?
Sure. So I think Dave has hit the topic and the subjects and things on the head as well. I think the piece that I would add is I also think there's a need for us to do some rethinking, right? When we think about this chat, I think the pandemic is going to create and has created the need for us to really rethink higher education, how we approach, how we maintain, how we provide access, how we provide technology, and those sorts of pieces. I think we can't go back to what we call normal. I think normal doesn't exist anymore, which I think then creates that space that we need to define what's the new type of thing.
That sounds great. I mean, I hope that's something that we could do at least a little bit today. I mean, obviously this is a big process, but this idea of rethinking education, rethinking what education is fundamental. And so I think at least hopefully outlining some problems and also where we're going in the future, I think is great. So, so Deborah, we're going to turn to you next, if you don't mind.
I don't mind, and I totally agree with Dave and Ramondo. But just to make it a little different, I'm going to go be a little philosophical and historical for a second, if I may. Earlier this year, some of my colleagues and I attempted to get an NEH COVID grant, and one of the colleagues was in the College of Education, so it was some liberal arts faculty, including Catherine Fusco was on the committee at that time, and we missed it by one very good. When we got the ratings back from the NEH, we had 2 excellence and 1 very good. If we had gotten 3 excellence, we would have received the grant. So that's a prelude to say we're still going to try to do something with this grant proposal, but I wanted to read something from it here so that it won't just be sitting in my computer somewhere. And I don't know if you all know this or not, but this year is the 75th year of the Harry Truman report on higher education. So he commissioned a report after World War II about higher education. It was called Higher Education for American Democracy. And he issued a bold call for expanding college access to far greater numbers of Americans, and argued that college education was essential to preserving and fostering democracy both at home and around the world. In addition, he insisted that new institutions be built and financial barriers to attendance be eliminated. The commission explicitly called for increasing college access to women and minorities, racial, ethnic, and religious minorities. In many ways, the report fundamentally changed higher education and public attitudes regarding the American dream. This was the source of community colleges. And so the idea was that many more federal grants were given, scholarships to students to get them into college. And so the idea was that the federal government positioned higher education to be a public good, believed it was a public good, believed it was a personal pathway into mobility, into greater success, into a stronger democracy in our country. And what I want to say is one of the greatest challenges and potential threats to our higher education today is that we, I think, are losing that vision of higher education. And I still continue to see higher education, and maybe I have to be a little biased here, but liberal arts education in particular, as a way to create stronger, more engaged, more thoughtful, more informed citizens of democracy, people living in this world and helping us to move this world forward. I see it as a pathway to the workforce development that people are talking about, but I think sometimes there's a narrow view of what workforce development should be, and we need to expand that view and think about creativity and communication and critical thinking and all of the things that I think we're going to need in a rapidly changing workforce of the future that is really changed by technology. And so one of the things I'm most worried about is that a liberal arts education, or an education that might be open to many more people, will become exclusively the province of the elite and the more general public. Keep in mind that in Nevada, 70% of our high school students are now students of color. And so if we're closing off education to those communities, to those individuals, then we are creating a kind of a class system, or maybe reinforcing the class system that I think is really problematic. Only 25% of adults in Nevada who are 25 and older have a BA degree. And so I just am continually worried about the sort of way that we have removed education and the payment for education from the states and the federal government as a public good. And we have put it on the backs of individuals and asked them to fund their own education. And that has made it less likely that some people will even be able to come to college. So I'm thinking about sort of democratization, the keeping our democracy strong. We need people who can, sort out information from disinformation, who are strong critical thinkers, who are good communicators. And that to me is one of the values of a public education. And I worry that we are losing that through sort of the professionalization of the university and some of the diminishment of resources for the universities.
That's great, thank you. I definitely, just from that little statement, I have follow-up questions I'd like to ask, but I'm going to hold off for now. But I'm really interested in this idea of the university as a public good in general, and just ways that we could promote this and support that moving forward. So Austin, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about this as well. And in particular, if you could talk a little bit about issues faced by students and really kind of talk a little bit about the student perspective on this as well.
Absolutely. I think what everyone has said so far is 100% accurate. Like, we are all struggling with the change in this process. It's hard to get readjusted to something that you've been taught your entire life. Like, here's how college is going to work, and here's how your education will continue, and then to have that just slipped on you in the matter of a moment. And so that's something that I personally have struggled with as a student, and I think a lot of my other students and peers here have as well. And so working with the change, but I think something that really plays into that is just the mental health of our students and our staff and our faculty as well. This is not easy. And so I think we have kind of an expectation of what should be, how things should be going. And when it's not living up to that, we tend to beat ourselves up for it, or we're trying, it causes a lot of different problems. And so I think students' mental health is something that we really need to start taking more priority over and taking a higher focus on, because while we have all of these great resources and programs available to us as students, if our mental health and our basic needs aren't met at the beginning of the day, then it's going to get really hard to go through all of these great resources into class and to continue our higher education, because we can't even get our basic needs met. So I think that really sums it up. Just your mental health as a student.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think it's something that we often lose sight of, is it's just the fact that that students, faculty, we all have, administrators, we all have these different issues, and mental health in particular is something that's often overlooked. So I think that's a good one to focus on. I mean, building on that a little bit, I do want to ask a question about something that's making mental health all the more of an issue, which is the pandemic. But before I pose that question, I do just want to remind everyone who's watching, if you have questions, you have things you want to talk about, feel free to throw those questions in the Q&A already. We're going to try to segue to your questions as soon as possible. So we want to hear from you all. So the Q&A is at the bottom of your screen. If you have a question, please let us know. So Austin, I'd like to continue with you, if you don't mind, and continue with this question of the pandemic in particular, and just how do you think the pandemic has affected your experience in higher education, your experience at the university, and also some of these issues, I mean, particularly things like mental health. So how has the pandemic affected these issues for you and for other students as well?
Absolutely. I'll start off with just the student experience. What we do within ASUN, and I think what I was looking forward to the most in coming to college, was just the student experience. Being here on campus, meeting new friends, going physically to classes, and getting engaged with different clubs and organizations. That studies have shown that that helps a lot with retention of students, and that's kind of some of the reasons that our students stay with us. Like, yes, we want an education, but that what you do outside of those classroom hours really needs to be enjoyable, and it needs to be worthy for you to stay here and pay all of these dollars that you talked about in the beginning of the introduction of this question. I mean, students are paying a lot of money for living, for student housing, for food, for their tuition. And so I think the engagement part of that was really lacking with the pandemic. And there's nothing that higher ed or any of us have known before that we can kind of base this off of. This is a complete trial run experience. And so trying to move student engagement to an online platform where you're not actually engaging with each other physically was a really, really big challenge. And so it's a new experience, and I think we've gained a lot from it. And it's also showed a lot of flaws in our system of where we need to focus more of our energy and our resources. So I'm excited to see kind of some of the changes that come out of this, because I think that's what we needed to reevaluate where we were and see what needs to be fixed moving forward. I think one of those gaps that I talked about earlier was mental health. So I think before the pandemic, teletherapy was not even kind of in talks at our university, and seeing how that was the only form of the counseling center during the pandemic is awesome. That's really cool that we were able to adjust and accommodate for our students and our staff and faculty as well. But it's important that we can see these changes, and then let's see how we can implement that into what we want to be post-pandemic life, to make it more accessible and affordable to students.
That's great. Thank you, Austin. Ramondo, would you care to speak a little bit about this as well, and kind of speaking in your role kind of with regard to some of these services for students and student affairs in general?
Sure. I think Austin's kind of hit the nail on the head there in terms of our need to shift, right? What we've done, as student life services, we were built on doing things in person and being engaging, and, showing folks the greatness and the resources and those sorts of pieces, and having to do that, in the span of a week, and shift and think about it and those sorts of pieces. And some things we did well, and some things we didn't do as well as we could, and had to readjust and repivot and those sorts of pieces. I think the big challenge for us is going to end up being that resource sort of notion. And I think we've all hit on that already. The budgets across higher education have been extremely affected by the pandemic, and no one's sure when that recovery is going to happen. There are things as an institution that just works better in person, and we need to recalibrate those things, while also trying to figure out ways to not burn our staff out at the end of the day. I haven't ran into a staff member who's not exhausted right now, and rightfully so, right? We have folks doing 1 or 2 or 3 types of or pieces of positions, just from our effect in terms of the budget challenges that have occurred from the pandemic. And so part of that is also, how are we going to help keep our faculty and staff engaged and motivated and healthy to be able to provide the support that we need them to be providing for our students, while we're also trying to figure out how can we help our students with their mental health and their anxiety and those sorts of pieces that Austin is mentioned earlier.
That sounds great. Thank you. And that just kind of makes me think, I've definitely seen that on the faculty side as well. Folks are doing a lot, and they're doing things they haven't done before. So David, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the ways the pandemic has affected undergraduate education in general, and ways of reaching students in general during this period, and kind of some of the impact that this has had.
Yeah, so I think we learned a lot about remote delivery, remote instruction, the good and bad of it. I think the one thing that's been great about it is, a lot of faculty were kind of reluctant to even do anything online. And I think we're over that now. I think we know that we can do it. Doing it well is another story. How do we do that in a way that works in the best interest of the student and such? So I think that's one of the good things that came out of the pandemic. We've innovated quite a bit. The one thing in support, kind of discussing students' mental health issues and such, One thing we've really have tried to do is enlist the whole university community to support each other, support students, support staff. We have a couple of vehicles to do that through the Navigate platform. We developed a student alert system where faculty can identify students that are having troubles in their classes. Maybe they're not attending, they're not engaging, so we can they could file a report online that goes to the advising staff. We kind of go out there and they reach out to the student trying to find what's going on. In certain cases, we've also had some very severe issues where students are potentially at a danger to themselves or to other people. In those very extreme cases, we have the student intervention team. And that's a group of folks, including myself and other student support service folks on campus, the counseling center, DRC, public safety office, the dean of students, a bunch of other professionals, the student health center, where we get together and we make sure that the students that we are worried about that come to our attention through that alert system are getting the services, being referred to the services that they need to. So again, I think there's been a bigger emphasis on us watching out for our community. And I know faculty, I know Dean Modelmog, I'm sure is very actively trying to support her faculty when they come under some kind of duress or some issues. So we've been, I think we've come together as a community really well to try to support each other. I think that was essential to just get through this. And we didn't catch every single case where we could have, but at least we have a mechanism to help as many people as we're alerted to anyway. So I think those are some really good things that we've done to try to support the students. It has been a stressful time, and we realize that. We've also worked with faculty to try to understand that the student issues that they haven't seen before, that maybe they were less empathetic towards in the past, and regarding attendance or things like that. We've been trying to, talk to faculty, say, hey, if a student is not feeling well, you don't have to, in the past we would require, documentation. And in these days, just to make sure that we're not spreading the virus any further to the classroom, we've been fairly liberal in trying to make sure that faculty understand that it's in everyone's best interest to maybe ease up on those attendance requirements. So I think people have become a little more aware of the needs of others through this pandemic. At least I hope so. I've witnessed it in a number of cases, so I'm confident that's where we're at.
I think so. I think in my classes as well, it's something I've tried to be aware of, and I think in general we all need to be a little bit more understanding. People are going through a lot. Students are going through a lot. We need a little bit of that compassion, I think. So Deborah, I was wondering if you could build on that a little bit and talk about things that we're doing here in the College of Liberal Arts and things that you've been doing to really address the pandemic or the way things have changed, some challenges you faced, something along those lines.
Yeah, so I agree with everyone so far. It's been a stressful time, and I've seen a lot of mental health issues in terms of not just students, but faculty and staff, and trying to work with them to make sure that they get the help that they need. Sometimes it's just a break, sometimes it's like 10 days off to go off and just be by yourself or be with your family and not really think about anything, not have all the stress on your shoulders. But the other thing that I was thinking about when I was hearing everybody talk is, you hate to say that the pandemic was good, because I would, if I had my choice, I would rather not have had the pandemic. But there are some things that I've seen that have come out of the pandemic that have been really incredible. And I think one of those is the creativity of our faculty, staff, and students. And, we have the arts in the College of Liberal Arts, and the arts are usually a very in-person, visceral, experience where you kind of need to be there to hear the music being played or to watch the actors on stage. And we couldn't do that. And so I was just incredibly impressed with what our faculty and students did to keep theater alive, for example, or to keep our concert series going, or to keep our performing arts series going. And so, that kind of creativity, I think, is kind of just endemic to the arts. But, artists really showed led the way in showing how we keep things going during a difficult time. And now we have techniques and we have methods and we have venues and practices that we can use that we didn't have before, because we have created them now during this pandemic. The other thing that I was thinking about is, now that we're know how to use Zoom, we've been able to bring speakers here that it would have cost us thousands of dollars in the past, but speakers have been willing to come, by Zoom for a modest honorarium, and then not necessarily having to pay all the travel and the lodging and the meals and everything. And so I think we've really expanded the people who speak and the people that we have contact with at our university. Also, when we give talks or have presentations, our audience is often webinars, our audience has often gone out across the world. And so there's been a way that we have connected with people in the university and outside the university that we've never done before. And then to get back to the mental health issue, or the kind of the benefits of technology, we're starting to do things like, teletherapy and telemedicine. And so, I was able to see my doctor just by Zooming with her. And that was, a real benefit to me, not having to go into the doctor's office. And we were able to do a lot of things that way. And I know a lot of people who've done therapy by Zoom or some other means. And I think that's been really, really helpful to expand those options for people, not having to do everything in person, but being able to do some things by Zoom. And I also know that our advisors, and maybe Dave will back this up, but they found that opening up advising to Zoom sessions really increased their contact with students and allowed them to help a lot more students and to be in service to a lot more students than before, and a lot more quickly than before.
I think those are some great points. And I think it really does highlight some of the things that technology can do and some of the things we're learning to do as well. I mean, even the fact that we're all on Zoom, the fact that we're all able to do this, the fact that we could bring in people from all over, these are incredible things. And these are skills that most of us, at least speaking for myself, skills that I didn't have, a year and a half before. These are things that we've learned to do, which I think is great. So I actually want to turn to one of the questions from the audience. And so this is a question from Greta de Jong. And so the question here is, how can we rebuild public support for higher education in a time when knowledge and expertise are denigrated instead of respected, and political candidates, such as J.D. Vance, say things like professors are the enemy? Deborah, do you want to take the first crack at this question, and then we'll go from there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one of the saddest things, at least for me, is the politicization of expertise, of science, of knowledge. This is our bailiwick in the university, and this is what we have all trained and studied to do for many years, is to bring the most accurate and evidenced knowledge that we can to the public and to other scholars, other people. And so it's been very discouraging to me to see some of the things that are happening in on our school boards, for example, to see some of the things that are starting to trickle in higher education. I think maybe, Breton, you mentioned that boards are getting involved in tenure decisions. Donors are backing out because a president uses a word like equity in a message. So it's very unfortunate to see that. But for me, the way you fight that is with better education, more education. And you try to expand access to education so that there are more people who can get engaged in the educational journey, not just from K through 12, but also community colleges and higher education. And so I really think we keep doing what we have been doing. We don't deviate from our values or from our understanding of what higher education is. This is what we present to the public. We do have a great service to provide to the public. We wouldn't have gotten through the pandemic as quick. I mean, I don't think we're done with it yet, but we wouldn't have gotten where we are without the great science, without the great social science, without the great understanding that we've had of vaccinations and of the importance of wearing masks and things like that. And so I think we don't back down. We keep doing what we're doing, and we just try to expand our education to as many people as we can.
Okay, I like that. I like this idea that one of the ways we face this challenge to education is through education, right? We educate people, we think about the questions, we engage with these ideas. I think that's great. David, would you like to kind of follow up on that from kind of a university-wide background as well, or from that position?
I agree with Deborah, and I embrace. I've said this to Deborah when I first took the job, that I really see the value of a liberal arts education. I think our students need that diversity of thought. I mean, I was a STEM major when I was an undergraduate, and I felt like I didn't get that. I was at a pretty much a STEM campus that focused very much on mostly, I took mostly science and math classes, and I feel like I lack that breadth of education I could have gotten. And I think our core, our gen ed program, our general education curriculum is designed to try to do that. And so I also feel that one thing that we need to do is train or get our students to understand how to have civil discourse, especially with people that are maybe polarly opposed to your point of view. How do you have a discussion? How do you have without getting, without having it turn into a brawl? I mean, I think that's really important. I mean, if we could do that, a lot of the problems we're having now, the polarization of our society it could address some of those issues. And I think we try to do that on campus. I think that would be, I almost feel like in some of our foundational gen ed requirements that civil discourse or communication, communication should be more emphasized in our curriculum. I think it's really important. I mean, the university should be a bastion of free speech and exchange of ideas. And it doesn't have to always be your idea. It should be other, we should have a diversity of ideas that we can have a civil discussion about. That's where I feel an important point of educating our students on how to do that is critical.
I definitely agree. That's actually something we really try to do in core humanities as well. One thing we try to do is really introduce students to different perspectives, different ideas, and really a way of having some of these debates. But that does make me think a little bit about this idea of free speech and civil discourse as well. So Armando, I was wondering if you could speak just a little bit about some of these free speech issues here on campus, things that we're doing, maybe ways that we're promoting discourse between different groups, or really just looking at some of these issues on campus in general.
Sure. I think there's quite a few things that we do, and I don't want to forget Dean Modelmog's point, because I think that ties in, right? And so she talked about we combat it with education. One of the things that we can't forget is we have years of data that tells us the benefit of higher ed, and we can't allow for what I call the up effect to take control of to let us forget that notion. And the up effect to me is from that movie Up, where it's about the squirrel, right? We have folks creating all of these squirrel distraction opportunities to help us forget, right, the data that's out there, the education that we're doing. And then that ties into this notion of First Amendment sort of pieces. There's education that we need to do with our students and with our faculty and with our staff around the First Amendment. And it ties into what Dave mentions, or Dr. Shintani mentions, in terms of we need to remind folks that we're a country that's based on disagreement. And out of that disagreement came compromise. And out of that compromise comes, you get some of this, I get some of this. This is what we think is in the best interest of the people. And I think we're forgetting that we're supposed to be the people. And by being the people, Austin's entitled to have his opinion. Dr. Shintani's entitled to have his opinion. Dean Modelmog's entitled to have her opinion. You're entitled to have yours. And we should put ourselves in the position to listen to their opinions and to not necessarily agree with everything and always and those sorts of pieces, but they're entitled to their opinion and I'm entitled to mine. And let's create the forum where we can put those opinions on the table and have a disagreement and still walk out of the room collegial. And that's the pieces that we're trying to teach our students. The Center for Student Engagement actually has cards around First Amendment speech. We have a website around the First Amendment sort of topics and opportunities and things like that. We're working with legal counsel, and I've brought a group of cross-campus individuals together to talk about First Amendment principles and develop workshops and educational forums and all those sorts of pieces. And so that there's a lot that's been done, a lot that we're developing, but it comes down to this is our community. And we're going to have disagreements within our community, and we need to figure out how to be civil within those disagreements and how to honor the perspective that folks have. We don't have to agree with it, but they're entitled to that perspective.
I think that's a great point. I think that's a crucial point. Deborah, did you want to jump back in? Sorry.
Yeah, just really quickly. Of course, I agree with you, Armando. I think, many people don't know that liberal in the liberal arts comes from the Latin word meaning free thinking. And it was the idea that this is what the kind of knowledge that you need in order to have a free society. But one thing I think is really important to kind of throw in the mix here is the kind of spread of disinformation and we need better tools for helping people to sort out information from disinformation. And I think, to me, that is a danger to our democracy. And that's not to say that there can't be differing opinions, but where's the evidence? What are the sources that you're using to create your argument? And so I think we're starting to talk about that in our college. We have several departments that are thinking about maybe rolling out a minor in political discourse and disinformation, or something along those lines, or maybe several courses that might, Dave, become part of the COs that all students should take. So just trying to think about kind of a progression, I think, in our country that has made this kind of free debate a little more difficult, because we're coming from such different viewpoints where we're not even living in a common reality.
I think that's definitely true. And that's definitely an issue that I've seen with friends and family members, where it's hard to debate when you don't even have shared facts, not even have information in common, where everyone has their own information that's being reinforced online or on television or wherever people go for their information. So I was actually wondering if we could focus maybe a little bit on what the students think about this as well, and kind of what the student perspective on this might be. And if students share maybe some of this mis-ease or kind of disquiet with expertise or education, or so basically if students feel as though they have access to free speech on campus, and if they do feel like they're empowered to have their voice heard as well. So Austin, if you could speak a little bit about that.
As much as I want to say yes, we actually were in a Senate meeting last night. So all the senators for all the colleges here are represented at the table. They're elected by their student representatives. And we had students come in and express public comment. We also had senators say, we had protesters outside of the Joe for the last 2 days. So I'm sure most of you are aware, but we've had people screaming kind of things that are not popular opinions and are hateful to people. And so what we learned yesterday, and so why I wish I could say yes, but I really can't after yesterday's discussion, is students don't know what their free speech rights are. And so I think as much as AVP Nash, the Center for Student Engagement, ASUN as well, we're all working together to try to promote these resources and create these websites. I think the general student doesn't know what their rights are on this campus. They don't know what they can and can't say, or how they should go about protesting or voicing their opinions. And so that's something that I think within ASUN we really need to focus on and take a look at what are we doing within the student government to make sure that student voices are amplified and heard around campus, because I think that's a really big issue. And that's something that comes up every single year. And I think going back to Dean Modelmog's point of something good that came out of the pandemic is we weren't having these kind of hateful speech acts come up as frequently in person. However, it's still now that we're back in person, it's right back again. And so it's almost like we've forgotten how to educate students and make sure they're informed and safe and they feel heard in this process. So that's something that I personally want to work on, just based on this feedback we've been hearing from students. Is we need to make sure they have the access to the platform and the resources to go and have their voices heard.
I think that's really important. And maybe that's something that, I mean, it's good, I think, for ASUN to work on that. Maybe something for us on the faculty side as well, as we are teaching more about public discourse, teaching more about what students' rights are, that might be kind of a natural extension for us as well, in a place for us to kind of work together to make sure students know what their rights are, know what they can say, know what's really more information about these issues. Oh, please go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, and I want to add to all of your points. I think to the misinformation kind of topic that was brought up as well. This is something that I'm very thankful for in my higher education, is that I think in your class, Dr. Rodriguez, and many of the other classes I've had, is we're really taught how to analyze and critically think about what the content provided to us is, where this is coming from, the external factors, the historical factors that played into this. And so I think that's something that's very, very beneficial to all of our university students in these CO classes, is you're learning these critical thinking skills that are necessary when, and as much as I loved core humanities, as it might not seem it's super applicable in the moment to your political science or psychology degree, the skills that you're learning in that process are really what help you in the long run. So I just wanted to add that part too.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I have a follow-up question here on this issue. And so we've rephrased it a little bit, but the question basically is, how do we balance between free speech and curbing hate speech so that students feel comfortable on campus as well? So I know this is a big issue. Maybe if we could just kind of touch it and then kind of move on. Ramondo, I don't know if you want to take a shot at this, and then we'll kind of move on to the next one.
Sure. Yeah, it's a notion, right? So, and this comes from the education sort of aspect. Folks can legally say hurtful, derogatory, all those adjectives, sort of things. What we have to help our community understand is, you know, I talked to legal about what have we done historically here about counter speech, right? What have we done historically here about helping all of our community have what Dean Modelmog talked about earlier, facts. You know, the most, in my opinion, one of the best ways to counteract hurtful, that sort of speech is with facts, and with us standing up together as a community and saying our counter speech of, we do not stand for that as a community. This is what we stand for. This is what we represent. While you're entitled to your opinion, this is what we as UNR represent. This is where we're going to go. This is, and so that notion of counter speech, that notion of the law, at the end of the day, the law is the law, and we're a public institution. That's not going to change. Matter of fact, we're a land grant institution. That's not going to change. First Amendment should be high on our list of priorities and our protection of that. But us as a community, which should also be high on our list of priorities, is this is what we stand for. And we should not, when others come into our community, not protect, not support, not all of those adjectives, the members of our community.
I think that's a great point. I really like this idea of counter speech in general and standing up for what we represent and saying who we are. I also like that you brought in the community. So I'm gonna try to squeeze in a couple questions really quickly because we're rapidly running out of time, unfortunately. But the first one here is from Louis Forline, and this is a follow-up to his question about engaging with students. And that's, how do you think that UNR serves and engages with the community at large? Better said, how well do you think the community, or how do you think the community feels about us? And I think this is a big issue again, a big question again. David, would you like to take kind of the first shot at this and take the first attempt?
Yeah, you know, I think we could always do a better job of engaging the community. I think oftentimes we get, as faculty, or staff, and we tend to be fairly insular in our approach to the community. We come to work, we focus on our scholarly activity, our teaching and such, and we go home. But there's a lot of people that don't do that. But I just say oftentimes that happens, and it's because again, we're very busy. But I think we have to have the community feel like they own this institution. The institution, again, I think I heard President Johnson at his the portrait unveiling last night. He was talking about, this is the people's university, and I agree with him. And I think that as a land grant, we need to focus on that. We need to be accessible to the people in the community, but also serve the community. We have to engage the community in a way that they see as meaningful. We are Carnegie High community engaged university. We have that designation, but what does that mean, right? How can we need to be out there. I think our students are our best ambassadors of the university. I know we strongly promote service learning and opportunities and civil engagement opportunities through ASUN. I think these are really important aspects of the college experience. And as citizens of the state or visitors to the state, their education is subsidized by tax dollars from our citizens, and so they need to see value of what they're getting from contributing to the education of these individuals. So I think it's really important that we have a culture of service for our students and our staff. So even no matter how busy we are, we have to figure ways to encourage that and reward that. And anyway, so that's kind of where I am. Thanks.
No, I like that I like that a lot. I like this idea of a culture of service, and I think that is really what we do. I mean, Deborah, I think this goes back a little bit to your point at the beginning about the university being a public good as well, and kind of being something that serves the community as a whole. So maybe do you want to speak a little bit to this as well? Just if you have a follow-up to David.
I absolutely do. First of all, I agree with Dave that we can always do things better, and I also think that one of the ways that we do that is we think about structural ways that we can support doing it better, and we also think about budget ways that we can support doing it better. And so, interestingly, today I was in a meeting with our planning committee in the College of Liberal Arts, and we were talking about engagement and rewriting our promotion and tenure guidelines so that engaged scholarship, engaged teaching, and engaged service become much more valued and open to being evaluated by tenure committees. Because we have people who do that work and who want to do that work, but if we're not going to make it possible for them to succeed in that work, then they're going to back out and they're going to do things the way they've always been done. And I think, based on some of the comments I made earlier about the importance of, educating, our community and making education available to more people, I think we need to be in the community much more than we are now. We need the community to understand, who we are, what we can bring to the community, how we can partner with the community, how they can partner with us. And so the other thing I would like to see would be maybe a grants program, some kind of funding that could be given to faculty or even staff who wanted to go out and engage with the community. So it would be similar to kind of a startup fund, to get your engagement project going with members of the community. So, and I also want to say that, we're not talking about a single community, we're talking about communities, right? Engaging with the arts community is perhaps a different project than engaging with an indigenous community or engaging with, the business community. And so I think we need to see value in all of those, but we also need to figure out ways to support faculty and staff who want to and are good at doing that kind of work.
I think that's a great point. I like this idea of multiple communities as well, because that's what it is, right? It's not one group. It's not, it's multiple different groups, multiple different communities in the same space. So we're rapidly running out of time, but I do have one last question. And so I actually think one of the questions from the Q&A, the question from Anushka Perez, I think this is similar to a couple other questions as well. And it's another big question, because apparently I love asking big questions with very little time for you all to respond to them. But the question is this: if we could completely rethink our educational system, imagine it anew, what would each of you want to see, create, and so on? Maybe we could limit this to maybe like one or two things that you'd want to see or create, because this is obviously a huge question. and go from there. Austin, I'm thinking of starting with you if you're ready, but we could also come back to you in a minute if you'd rather.
There's so many things, but I think just going back to what everyone has said again, I would love to see more civic engagement. And so whether that's through service learning courses, whether that's through being involved in like the democratic process, I think universities and institutions have such a unique platform because there are so many students who are here to become educated. And so political candidates and anyone else, really, they have such a strong platform if they came to these institutions and they try to express their opinions. And so I think students and staff and faculty here are all eager to learn. And so getting students more involved in communities, civic processes would be great. And then I think if I really could rethink it, I would also just bring it back to getting students involved with each other outside of the classroom even more than we have before. The classroom is so important, and that's why we're all here. That's kind of the fundamental of why we're here. But theoretically, I'm in class for 15 hours a week. So I'm taking 15 credits. And so what am I doing with all of those other hours that's going to make it worth me being here 15 hours a week, you know? And I really think that we need to put more of an emphasis on that. So I'll keep it short.
No, I think that's great. Outside the classroom, you're preparing for those 15 hours in the class. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, there's more and more important things, or important things in general to be doing and making connections. So Armando, what about, would you like to go next?
Sure, and I think I would just ditto what Austin said, and then to me, it's technology. You know, we gotta, in some way, shape, or form, catch up to it to let it then pass us by again. But we gotta get a better grasp, a better wraparound of the evolving evolution of technology.
Sounds good. Thank you. Deborah, how about you? Would you like to go next?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge question, and you know, my ideal would have tons of components to it, and one would be that faculty would be well paid, and staff would be well paid. We're living in a state and an area of the state where cost of living is going up rapidly, and some of our faculty can't even really afford to live here anymore. But also, students would have an accessible and affordable education, maybe even a free education in some cases. But then if I think about, you know, just the curriculum and some of the things that we might do, I think we should start seeing this as education and re-education, because I think what's going to happen in the future is that many people are going to have to come back to school, whether it's for another degree or a credential, or, you know, just kind of I heard that Berkeley has half degrees now, half majors. I was like, well, what's that? That sounds interesting. But I think there's going to be more need for people who understand, sort of have interdisciplinary background, but that also are educating themselves and re-educating themselves. And we have to be prepared as a university to accept that adult re-entry population, because they'll need to come back to get more education.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's interesting because I think that point kind of pairs with Ramondo's as well, whereas education, or with technology, is changing education. It's also changing the workforce as well. And so we need these new skills. We need these new expertise to compete, and we will need to go back and kind of retrain for these new positions, these new jobs. So David, do you want to have the last word here as we talk about what the university will become in the future as we move forward?
A lot of pressure here. I agree with what everyone said. Access is critical to higher education, and I think Ramondo's and Deborah's point about how do we create that access, and it's through technology. I think if we could figure a way to maintain our identity as a collegiate campus, but also open that up to people that don't have the schedule or the ability to come to campus in the normal day through remote learning opportunities, I think that would be great. I think there's ways, if we could expand our ability to teach a face-to-face synchronous class, but also beam that out or record that lecture. We have that ability, but we could improve that. We could if we could do that in broadly across the spectrum of all our classes, that would really expand our ability to reach more students and address their needs to maybe work or address family responsibilities, those types of things. So I think access is critical. I think the other thing that Ramondo and I talk about quite a bit is a holistic view of student success. This idea the whole student, the academic is only one portion of that experience, but that personal growth, the ability to interact in the community, become a kind of a whole person. For a lot of students that are coming, fresh out of high school, this is the first time they've been out on their own, really. And so how do we create an environment where they're going to thrive and not just academically, but just as for personal growth? So I think these are really important things. And I think a partnership between the academic side of the house and student services side is critical. So I think we're doing a great job at getting there. So I'm really optimistic for the future of what this campus can be. I mean, I think the pandemic has been difficult, but I think it's also showed how resilient and how strong we can be. So I'm optimistic, and I think everybody on this panel is responsible for helping us get to that point. So.
That's great, thank you. And I think that's a really nice way to kind of sum things up as well. And I like this idea of it being a holistic enterprise, right? It's not any one department or college, it's really the university as a whole. And it's really not just academic faculty, but also administrative faculty, also students, administrators, just everyone working together, which I think is, yeah, just a nice place, or a nice note for us to end on. So just to wrap up then, I do want to thank the Thought on Tap committee, Vadrika Etienne, Simone Gubler, Callum Ingram, Carlos Mariscal, Stephen Pasqualina, Anishka Perez, and Daniel Enrique Perez. Special thanks to Carlos Mariscal for helping to moderate the Q&A. For helping to moderate the Q&A. I also want to thank the College of Liberal Arts, also Chris Danzel and everyone in the CH office for helping to make this possible. Thanks to our partner, Laughing Planet. Even though we're not there in person, we're there in spirit and in heart. Let's say that. I also want to thank our fantastic panelists, so Austin Brown, Deborah Modelmog, Ramondo Nash, and David Shintani. And most of all, I want to thank all the attendees for coming and watching and doing this with us. I love that we were able to do this. I think it was a great conversation. I hope you all enjoyed it. And so yeah, also just a quick note, once the session ends, everyone will receive a quick survey in their email. Please fill it out. It should just take a couple of minutes. Let us know what you liked, maybe what you didn't like so much. Also, thank you to everyone who has questions. We had way more questions than we were able to get to, unfortunately, but thank you all for being involved. I think the questions were great. So on behalf of Thought on Tap, I'm Breton Rodriguez. Thank you all, and